I should be saying that in Tigrinya. Anybody know how to say welcome in Tigrinya?
Yes.
How do you say welcome in Tigrinya? Say it again. Yeah, that. My name is Susan Bardoon, and I, on behalf of World Learning, I run the Conversation Partner Program. I put on workshops every month. Usually they're for the conversation partners, but every once in a while I team up with ECDC, and we put on something for the whole community that is more cultural. But first of all, let's start. How many of you are conversation partners? Raise your hands. Thank you to all of you. And any of you conversation partners with Eritreans? Yeah, that's great. So we're excited about this event. The facilitators are Marty Anderson and Karen Blanchard. I'm going to hand over them in just a second, but I just wanted to make a couple of announcements. The next cultural event with ECDC will be probably in the summer, and it will be the Democratic Republic of Congo. We've already done one on all about Islam. Today is Eritrea, and Congo will be next. Those are our three primary groups of refugees. And then the next workshop for the conversation partners is going to be on Saturday, May 25th. Ray Clark is going to be running a workshop on grammar. Yeah. How to make grammar fun, both for the learner and the teacher. Okay. We are being recorded by Brattleboro Community TV. It's not live. And we're very grateful because a lot of people wanted to come tonight. And you know there are 3 other things going on. Yeah, so people are saying, well, I don't know which one to come to. So I will send out a notice to my e-list and on your e-list as well to say how you can get onto it. Right. Thank you very much for doing that. Let's see, what else? You have these papers on your desk, on your chairs. If you have any questions about Eritrea, anything to do with the culture, if you will write it there, and at some point there will be a short break in the middle. Very, there might be a break, yes. And would you put it in one of these beautiful baskets, and then at the end, they will do their best to answer the questions, and we have some Eritreans here as well. So I think that's all from me. Ian Heffley, who's with ECDC, and he's going to make some announcements.
Hi everyone, I'm Ian Heffley. I've met many of you. Some of you have seen my emails flying around, I'm sure. Thank you for coming tonight. I did a count today and we have 52 Eritreans here in Brattleboro. So it is solidly in our top 3 of groups. Now, who has volunteered for ECDC before? Everyone almost raised their hand. Who has volunteered with Eritreans before? Yes. Okay. Who knew where Eritrea was before they started coming? Yeah. So I want to say thank you. I am only on month 6 of my job, which has gone by super fast. You'll be hearing a lot from me. I will send out the link to the BCTV recording that we can share. I also have some pictures and the materials that Marty and Karen will be using that I can share out. I look forward to being able to do more of these with you and come and chat if you have any questions afterwards. Now I'm going to hand it over to our trusted facilitators over here, Marty Anderson and Karen Blanchard. Thank you for coming.
So I'm Karen Blanchard, for those of you that don't know me. I lived in Ethiopia for a couple of years. I've also been to Asmara, and I did work in Somalia. So the Horn of Africa is a love of mine, and hence I'm here to do this work.
Marty Anderson, also have fallen in love with this part of the world and their people. I have never been to Eritrea, but I have spent some time working in Ethiopia, and I've been very smitten with the Eritreans that I've met as they've come to town. I'm looking at one of my favorite people there. So anyway, with no further ado, we're just going to move into a little bit of kind of background about Eritrea. But before I say anything, I'd like to hear from anybody. What are some things that you know about Eritrea? And Jima can participate too. What's something you know? Yeah, go ahead.
There was a civil war for independence. It was part of Ethiopia, and I also believe that it was invaded by the Italians prior to World War II.
Yeah, so several different moments of discontent and invasion.
Invasion, war.
And war, yeah. What else does anybody know? Yeah, go ahead, please.
According to the Frontline show about Eritrea, it's a very repressive situation right now and really difficult for people, just everyday people.
Yeah.
And lots of prisons.
Regime, people imprisoned,
Yeah.
yeah. Much more about that. Karen and I will talk a bit about that. Yeah, Gloria.
All of the, I believe, both males and females are conscripted into the military.
Right, so forced participation, conscription, and I think, is this right, Jima, it begins when you're about 18, that you have to go in the military. It's a pretty young age.
Soldier,
Yeah, maybe it's, yeah,
She said it.
yeah. And then it's unlimited, yeah, David.
It's on the coast,
It's on the coast of what?
Africa.
But what's the coast?
The Red Sea.
The Red Sea, great. So what else do you know?
the food is delicious.
Incredible, incredible food, yeah.
The people are beautiful.
Yeah,
And sweet.
sweet and beautiful people, yeah. Yes, Elizabeth.
One thing I don't know is, are the Eritreans who are coming here under the same government rules as the Afghans? Are they going to be able to get status? Or, I think it's different, but I'd be curious about that.
Maybe we can, do you want to answer that right now, Ian, or shall we wait?
We can wait because it's complicated.
It's complicated. Okay, so here you see a map of, and pardon my audiovisual stuff, it's going to be confusing, but can anybody show me where Eritrea is on that map? Yeah, Debbie, go show it. Show us.
People might really see it better if they right there.
Yeah.
The dark little, it's got a lot of coastline and shares a lot, and it's bordering Sudan, so we know what's going on in Sudan.
Close to Sudan, Egypt, Djibouti. Ethiopia, of course, is right next door.
Across from Yemen.
Across from Yemen, yeah, a hotbed of stuff going on.
Should we turn the lights down?
What you may not know, because if you look at an average map of the world, they make the continent of Africa look the same size as South America or North America, which is a skewed vision of this continent. Here you have the continent with other countries interspersed. So this is all of the African continent, and you see how the United States just kind of takes up this little quadrant up there. China, which we think is huge, takes up this much. This is the UK, this little bit over here. India, Eastern Europe. So you can see that it is such an enormous continent. One of my personal pet peeves is if people say, oh yeah, I've been to Africa.
Right.
And I feel like, oh no, you have to be much more specific. You need to talk about which country, and you need to talk about which part of which country in order, because of the enormity of it. So if you think that Eritrea is this little teeny spot up there in this enormous continent, yet it is an important spot on the continent because of its proximity, as we saw in the previous picture, to all these important countries, and the fact that it sits on the Red Sea. An interesting truth, though, Eritrea is this little teeny country on this enormous continent, but it is 5 times the size of Vermont.
Say that again?
5 times the size of Vermont. So 5 Vermonts would fit into Eritrea. So it begins, you get a sense of scope about, yes, it's a small country, but it plays a very, very, very important role. And many times it has played a role, which Karen is going to talk about in just a minute, as really a pawn. People have, different governments have really used Eritrea for their own means and their own needs, including, unfortunately, I'm sure, the United States. So Karen, a little history, please.
So there's a handout when you leave that really are the 3 sources that I'm using for this reflection on the history of Eritrea. One is read from the embassy of the state of Ethiopia, from the state of Eritrea, I mean. One of the newest countries in the world, yet the history of Eritrea dates as far back as 6,000 BCE. And the origin of the name of Eritrea is the word Erythrean. It's Greek for red, in reference to the Red Sea. In 1517, the Ottoman Turks conquered most of Eritrea. They were driven out much by the country by the end of the 16th century, apart from some coastal strongholds. In 1869 onwards, Eritrea becomes under Italian control as part of the so-called scramble for Africa among European powers. In 1882, it becomes an Italian colony, incorporated into Italian East Africa after Mussolini's forces conquered Ethiopia. In 1941, during World War II, the region is freed from fascist rule by British and Ethiopian forces. And from one decade, from 1942 to 52, British administration of Eritrea as a UN trust territory. In 1952, the UN General Assembly votes to make Eritrea a federal component of Ethiopia. Eritrean Liberation Front, the ELF, is formed. In 1962, Ethiopia annexed Eritrea, a federal component of Ethiopia, as I just mentioned. In 1962, Ethiopia annexes Eritrea, giving impetus to the independence movement and the 30-year war for independence. In 1988 to 2000, Eritrean and Ethiopian border clashes turned into a full-scale war, which leaves some 70,000 people dead. In 2008, fighting breaks out between Djiboutian and Eritrean troops in the disputed territory, border territory between them. At least 9 Djiboutian soldiers were killed. The U.S. condemns Eritrea, but Eritrea denies launching an attack. The UN imposes sanctions on Eritrea for its alleged support for Islamist insurgents in Somalia. In 2010, Eritrea, Djibouti agreed to resolve border dispute peacefully. And after investigated for human rights abuses by the African Union, in 2018, Ethiopia and Eritrea end state of the war after Ethiopian diplomatic overtures. UN Security Council ends sanctions on Eritrea for the allegations of support for the jihadists in Somalia. From the BBC, dated 10th May 2011 and updated April in 2023, the population of Eritrea is 6.2 million. It's 117,600 square kilometers. I tried to give that to you in miles. I believe it is 73,073 square miles. The population is 6.2 million. And the languages, I found this fascinating to me. The languages are Tigrinya, Tigray, Arabic, English, Beja, Kunama, Saho, Bilen, Nara, and Afar. It is a one-party state and a highly militarized society now. Estimates indicate that hundreds of thousands of Eritreans have fled the country in recent years, making the perilous journey across the Sahara and the Mediterranean to Mediterranean to Europe and elsewhere. So President Isaias Afwerki has governed since it became an independent country in 1993. His People's Front for Democracy and Justice is, if you ever see the acronym PFPDF, this is why I'm doing this, is because oftentimes in the news you see these acronyms, but we don't actually always know what they are, yeah? Is the sole political party. He was head of the provisional government in 1991 when Asmara was taken during the war with Ethiopia. That was the end of that war and the beginning of independence. But following the referendum vote, he was elected president and chairman of the parliament, giving him control of both executive and legislative branches of the government. Presidential elections planned for 1997 never took place, and a constitution ratified in that same year has never been implemented. Presidential elections planned for then did not happen. And media, beyond the state-sanctioned newspapers and broadcasters, are non-existent. In 2021, Reporters Without Borders rated Eritrea as having the worst overall press freedom in the world, even lower than North Korea, as all media publications and access are heavily controlled by the government. So I don't only want to say, every time I do this, I tear up. I have, a lot of Eritrean friends that were so looking forward to independence and civilian law, to be able to be the country that they really wanted to be. And it is the saddest thing for me that that so many Eritreans have had to leave their country because of the repression that's going on. So I wish. And the other thing that I'm not going to read Human Rights Watch, but I have that up there as a handout. But the Eritrean government is also recognized by at least 129 countries. They have an embassy in Washington. So it's an interesting, if you look up sort of the embassies that they're a part of, and also their, foreign relations, when you look at, you'll see more. But that gives you a sense of some of the things you already knew, and I think some of the things that you might not have known. So anyway, thank you.
Yeah, no, so the more you start to study Eritrea, the more it breaks your heart, the story about it. In getting ready for this presentation, I did a lot of reading that I had not done before. And every time I'd open up a document, it would just be more and more data. It would just be horrifying to read. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about religions in Eritrea. And I'm curious, there are 4 sanctioned religions. Can you guess what they might be? Orthodox is one, yeah. Muslim? Yeah, a specific Sunni. That's the only one that's accepted. What else?
Jewish?
Jewish?
Catholic.
Catholic. Yep. And a final one is,
Orthodox.
no, that's the first one. No, Jehovah's Witnesses have been imprisoned for years, some of them for 15 years. The 4th one is an evangelical form of Protestantism. So, and what's interesting, so Karen quoted, we've been just looking at resources. She talks about the U.S. government estimates the population at 6.2 million people. in 2022. The UN says there's 3.75 million. That's a big difference. And part of it is because it is almost impossible to come up with appropriate data because of the secrecy of the government and the protection. So even you'll read about, oh, half people are Orthodox and there's a few Sunni Muslims. Then you read something else. No, it's more Muslims than Orthodox. And then you'll read something else. No, there's lots of evangelicals. So the data is so confusing that it's hard to even understand really what's actually going on.
And I think you're talking about the imprisonment of people. There was anyone who stands up. There was a Catholic priest that spent, I don't know.
He spent most of his life in
was
prison.
in prison.
Yeah, he wrote a paper, a number of Catholic bishops wrote a paper decrying the lack of religious freedom, and he spent his life basically imprisoned until his death a couple years ago in his late 90s. And there's a Baha'i community, they say, it's about 500 people. There's one statistic said, we know of one Jew in Eritrea. I'm like, okay, that's probably because they don't say anything. Yeah, there's just, it's not funny. It's just the repression is so universal that like if you're a Jehovah's Witness, you'll be arrested and you'll be thrown in jail. There is an office of religious affairs, and their job is you can't build a church or a place of worship without the approval of the Office of Religious Affairs. And they strictly control that. If they catch wind of a group of people gathering for the purpose of praying or worshiping, everybody can be swept up and arrested. This idea of indefinite national service, again, is no joke. Hi. Hi, good, I'm glad you came.
Come on in.
Wonderful. Yes, so it's not like, other countries have forced service in the military or in the public sector. But in Eritrea, it's indefinite.
It's what?
Indefinite. So if you're conscripted, they can keep you in that role for as long as they want, forever. And if you are found like praying, and they discover that you're just going to get thrown into this conscription service. So what I have understood, and I don't want to speak for our Eritrean friends because I don't know all their stories intimately, but what I've been told is that many people either try to get away before they turn 18, or when they are in, they get conscripted and then they try to escape from it, which is a hugely risky activity. As Karen said, they did write a constitution, which has never been enacted. In the Constitution, it says that people have complete religious freedom. They have human rights are going to be acknowledged. People have the right to do this and this and this. It's all been written out, but it has never, ever been enacted. There are 20 Jehovah's Witnesses that they know of who are currently in prison, and they've been in prison for more than 20 years. A combination of refusing to participate in military service and refusing to denounce their religion. So that's the other kind of out. If you get picked up and you say, okay, no, I'm no longer that religion, you might be able to be released. So I could go on and on. This stuff is just heartbreaking to read. But it does ban all non-Sunni practices of Islam. I'm not sure why, but that's the preferred Islamic religion. And this line, I love it. The government continued to permit the last Jew known to remain in the country to maintain a synagogue as a historic site. So there's a historic synagogue with one Jew guarding it. So yeah, the Human Rights Watch is, it's just death-defying. to read what they're paying attention to. And so what our friends have managed to leave from, at some point, maybe Ian can talk about the trajectory of how people end up in Brattleboro. I think that would be an interesting thing, but maybe.
And there's a person who
And
has written something that she would like to read.
Very good, thank you. So let's go, is this Nanette?
Yeah.
Wonderful, Nanette, please, come, would you mind coming here to read something?
You can sit here. You can sit
Or
here.
you can sit there.
You can just sit right here.
Is that okay? Can you still see with the camera if
Do
she
you want to
sits
sit
over
here or
here?
do you want to stand?
Okay, thank you.
Can she just sit in front?
She would love to see you on the camera.
Are you okay being on camera, or do you not want to be on camera? No camera.
Okay,
You want to be filmed.
just the voice.
Okay,
Yes.
loud.
Okay.
Really loudly. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Explain is short. I explain about the culture. The culture of Eritrea is the collective cultural heritage of the various population native to Eritrea. Eritrea has 9 recognized ethnic groups. Tigrinya, Melali, Tigray, Saho, Kunama, Nara, Rashida, Edarut, Afar, Bilen. It is 9 ethnic groups. Each group have their own tradition and customs, but some traditions are shared and appreciated among different ethnic groups. The cultural food of Eritrea is injera. Injera is the national dish of Eritrea. This flatbread is made from pig flour and has slightly spongy texture. Yeah. Another is shiro. Shiro, popular cultural dish often during fasting and made ground beans or peas. The third is hembasha. Hembasha is a traditional bread that symbolizes the rich cultural heritage of North Eritrea and Ethiopia. Thank you so much.
I'm so happy to meet Minette finally. We've heard so much about you. Thank you for coming, both of you. Do you want to add anything at this moment? Or maybe later when we have some questions?
Maybe Jima.
Yeah, maybe Jim.
Oh, yeah, Jima.
No, it's the same.
It's the same. But maybe later, if we have some questions, then you can, rather than having to come up with something to say, you might want to answer some questions. And we'll do that in small groups, so you don't have to speak to everybody. But I wanted to mention something about you are going to have the treat a bit later of trying some injera. We have some little items for you to taste. An important thing to know about those who practice the Orthodox tradition is that fasting is a very important aspect of that religion. There are.
Minette's saying now is fasting.
Yeah.
Yep.
So now is a fasting time, and fasting, maybe tell us what fasting means right now. Could you just explain that, please?
We practice fasting. We are eating at the fasting time vegetables only.
Mm-hmm.
We are not using product of milk
Mm-hmm.
and meat.
Mm-hmm.
We are eating after 3 o'clock.
So
So if
fasting.
anyone couldn't hear that just loud, she said that they're eating completely vegetarian, no meat products, and they wait to eat until after 3 o'clock.
It's actually a vegan diet because there's no.
Is that always, not just after fasting or during fasting, but?
On fasting days, no, on non-fasting days, you will eat meat and dairy products, but on fasting days, it's vegetables, injera, and no dairy, and no meat products.
And how many days?
55 days.
55, yeah.
55 days?
Yes.
In 1 year?
Leading up to
Yes, in
their
1 year,
Easter.
55 days.
Wow.
The holiday is May 5. Easter.
Coming right, it's coming
Orthodox
soon.
Easter.
Yes.
What will you do to celebrate Easter?
To celebrate Easter, you go to church at night from 6 p.m. up to 4 a.m.
The middle night is the best time to practice our religion
Yes.
because we are human Jesus rights.
Right. Can you say that a little more loudly for the heat?
Or
All
repeat?
the time.
She said that the middle of the night is the best time to practice their religion.
All right, I think we'll have a chance to hear more about these important practices when we get together in smaller groups a little bit later. So Karen, can I turn the floor back to you about the next topic?
Sure. So as you can imagine, people coming from another country, coming from Eritrea, and finally landing here, have gone through a journey, let's just say. And they have children with them, or they don't, or they've come, or they've left family behind. So, you know, we made reference to this. If you really want to look more about trauma in terms of people's life experience, there are so many sources on the web that you can look at. I think it's really important to do that investigation if you're working with your conversation partner, as you are, many with Eritrean people and others. I think, again, you know the people that you're with, so, you know, being able to find out a little bit about what their life experience might have been, may be part of a conversation, or it might not. People might not want to talk about it, it might not want to bring up all of that stuff. But it's important, I think, for all of us that are working with people from other places who have been displaced, and that we do more of this. I'm not going to go through the levels of trauma or anything like that with you, but just a recognition that it's so important for all of us to be doing that work to understand. You know, it's not unlike, how many of you people just have lived in another culture? I know people who are from another culture, but have lived in another culture. So, and if you've lived there for a period of time, you know that even under your circumstances, there is adjustments to be in those places. You think people are laughing at you, you think that they're maybe, you know, they're talking about you, but in fact they're talking about somebody else. We all go through those processes. So if you think of the exacerbation of that in terms of where people have come from and what is just the feeling in their heart of leaving home, loving home, not being able to be home, and learning to live and be in another home. So I'm only just raising that. I know it's speaking to the choir here, but I think for all of us, it's just a reminder that we need to do a little bit more investigation of this, see what works. If you're working with young children, that's one way to go. If you're working with adults, that's another. And you know, if you're working with men or working with women or working with people of different genders, then that's one thing to look at too. So that's really all I wanted to say. How about, I mean, have you all had experience looking at this kind of literature in your
What kind of literature? What kind of-
trauma?
Oh.
Trauma literature is what I was talking about. Trauma literature. Anybody? here. I know people here who've done a lot of this work in their professional lives. But I'm just curious in terms of working with, you know, the Eritrean population or other populations. Have you anything that you'd like to add to your colleagues here to talk a little bit about what it's been like? Yes.
I've just assumed that there was trauma and haven't asked about it
Yeah.
because I feel that it's, I follow their lead.
Yes.
But everything that you've said and everything I learned through watching that front line, you just have to assume that there's trauma. But also, there's love and gratitude and it's.
And
there's
resilience,
both.
wouldn't you say?
And resilience.
Resilience.
And intelligence and warmth and it's all of that.
Any other person wanna say something about this? Yes.
Many of the Eritreans that I've met have been out of Eritrea for a long time, living in Ethiopia, perhaps other countries,
Or Sudan or,
in camps, refugee camps.
yeah.
I
So
think,
That would be a great time
Yeah.
for you
yeah,
to chime in
that's
about
where I
that.
was gonna jump in.
That's perfect.
Good, go for it, Ian.
I think that's important to remember as we continue being a permanent refugee resettlement site here in southern Vermont. Our first population came from home. They came straight from home. Very often they turned the key on a house that they were living in for the last 5-10 years and left. In Eritrea, it's a different story. We have clients from Eritrea who we approached to join us this evening, and they said, I don't know anything about Eritrea. I haven't been there in 10, 12 years. I did the math and realized that this person was avoiding the draft. And that is a really important thing for us as the host community to really remember, that the culture overseas, or when people leave Eritrea, they may end up in Sudan or Ethiopia for years and years, living in refugee camps or living in the suburbs or outskirts of big cities, and then they come to Brattleboro in a different environment. So no Eritreans are really coming straight from Eritrea right now, and that's important to remember when you're talking with them about what is home, or what do you miss about home, or what do you like about the culture here. I'm thinking we are getting a big shift that way also with our Congolese population, where many of them were in South Africa for a while and have the added trauma of xenophobic attacks in South Africa, because South Africa being the most developed economy in that part of the world, they have very similar mentalities of everyone's coming and taking our jobs that you may see on some of the border states here in this country. So I was working with someone yesterday who said they decided to leave after being in South Africa for over a decade and a half because of these xenophobic attacks. So there's layers of trauma that we can just be welcoming and a sympathetic ear for when they decide to let us know. Because the agency and the power, remember, as a refugee resettlement agency and a refugee resettlement community, our goals are self-sufficiency and agency.
What's agency mean?
Agency, the ability to make your own choices and feel empowered to make those choices in a culture that may not be your own. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And-
could I just add some?
Yes.
I, this is really responding more to Karen, but it's jumping off of you, is that one of the big learnings for me, and I think for all of us.
Could you raise your voice just a little
Oh,
bit?
I thought I was being loud anyway.
That radiator over there.
We learned this first with the Afghans, and now I'm learning it with the Eritreans, is that there's a tremendous diversity in Afghanistan, class, language, education. And similarly, the Eritreans, not only have they been in Egypt or Sudan and for however long, but they also are different religions and they also speak some different languages. So just because they look about the same age and are from the same country, there still is quite a bit of diversity. So one person's trauma is different than another person's for whatever reason, and that's been important for us to figure out.
Good. And I think there was a question earlier, I think it was Elizabeth, asking about status changes for Eritrean populations. It does happen, but there's not the funding there like there was for Afghan populations in order to keep it moving along. I do know that in a recent legal clinic there were some Eritrean clients that were moving through the different status changes to get to a green card, but it is a lot slower process than what was with Afghanistan.
Not necessarily. It's probably quicker for many of them. It depends what status the Afghans came on.
Because we have
Yeah.
Afghans who are really, they don't like this.
Yeah, it's
Silence.
Different, not
Yeah.
slower is what I meant.
Yeah.
Different. Sorry.
Well, I was just saying that there was the first wave, so to speak, of Afghan refugees when they were at SIT. They came through the, military camps. They had a different financial structure than any of the other people that are coming, the Afghan people that are coming and so forth and so on, I think.
Yeah.
Because that's been one of the challenges, Ian, that people hear that that was the case, and it's not the case anymore.
It was a very unique structure, but I think this gentleman had his hand up.
The Afghan new Vermonters that I've experienced seem to have strong connections with people home back in Afghanistan, but the Eritreans I'm familiar with don't necessarily have that. And I don't know if that's consistent with other people's experiences.
Yes.
Yes, can we hear from some of the conversation partners? This would be a great time to sort of share some of your experiences about what have you noticed with regard to this gentleman's question.
Okay, so
Yes?
she's saying that it's hard to be in touch with the family from back home because they don't have access to the internet in Eritrea because of the government is blocking it.
Snail mail, do they have?
Another question here.
Oh, and it's also too expensive, she's saying.
It's too expensive to call.
Yeah.
I don't know if this can I answer this question?
Sure.
But once people get to the border, I have experience speaking with people who left Eritrea, they went to the border, that's all I know. Is it tough to get through the border? It was difficult to get to the border, but what happens when you get to the border? You have to sneak through?
Within the state of Eritrea?
Yeah, you're going from Eritrea to Ethiopia.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah, because I
Ethiopia.
think we have an interest
So
over here.
the question is, he understands it's hard to get to the border in Eritrea, but how do you get across the border once you get to the border?
From myself, when I was in Eritrea, I am soldier. Because I live it as the border, around the border. It is easy to cross because also I am soldier, I am working, training.
Okay, so she said,
About 80 to cross the border. All at night.
At night.
At night.
At night it's easy.
Yeah, it's easy. Cross. Mostly.
Oh, it's easy at night.
If you catch, they shoot.
Oh, not easy, okay.
yeah. We're repeating it, sorry. So She said at night it's easier to sneak over the border, but she was, when you're a soldier above 18, you can get to the border easier because they'll post you on the border. So she was working the border, and that is how she was able to see where to get through.
And then I was saying, if you can try to cross at night, but they might arrest you if they catch you, or they might shoot you.
They may arrest or shoot you.
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
Also,
To me, obviously, yes.
for
Karen,
Gina,
yes, go ahead.
Well, I was just going
She
to
has a
say that,
different
oh,
story.
sorry. In terms of, if you look at these sites that I had, you know, there are a lot of people who are in, you know, are soccer players and so forth that have defected over time, once they've been able to get out, yeah?
Football players.
Yeah, there is a video on the resource sheet that we're handing out where it says at one time the entire Eritrean national soccer team defected when it was abroad. The entire team. Lisa,
last time,
And the doctors.
and I think Gina has a different story.
different story for her mother. So,
Mhm.
can you talk? Can you take, read it? So her mother has been trying to come to meet them in Egypt for many years. And she tried 2 times, and each time they turned her back. The 3rd time, she paid some sari, which is, I understand, like a coyote, to a person to take her. And that, by being able to pay, then she made it. And then the issue here for her was that Jima had to pay that person. So that's another way. And that was not cheap.
It always works.
Yeah. Did you want to add anything else at this moment?
Not right now.
Okay. Please, another question, go ahead.
How do refugees get to this country, and is there any chance they be sent back? I mean, once you're here, are they safe?
I don't know. I don't
Well,
know.
this
What
one
what
I
do you
do know.
think,
He
Tim?
does know the answer.
So all of our clients have been vetted by the UNHCR,
Which is?
the UN High Commission for Refugees. So they have gone through a vetting and background check, probably more than any other American in this room. More in-depth and really intrusive sometimes than any American would go through in a typical life. So when they get over, they come through the IOM, which is the Institute
Intergovernmental Organization of Migrants.
Thank you. Intergovernment, keeping up with all the acronyms. So they come through the IOM, the Intergovernmental Organization on Migration, which comes into the Office of Refugee Resettlement in our federal government in the State Department. And then they get sparsed out over 10 federally funded refugee resettlement agencies which are around the country. ECDC is one of those 10, and we have 9 locations around the country, of which Brattleboro and Bennington is the newest one, I believe.
Yeah, just to point out that for ECDC, so all of the refugees that you are working with, they had refugee status before they arrived in the United States. None of them came across a border.
So are they safe once they're here?
Yes.
Yes. The short answer is yes. Gloria.
Yeah, but just to add to that, there were some of the Afghans, and this gentleman beside me is an Afghan refugee, one of the first groups, and his family's still in Afghanistan, so that's a really difficult situation for a lot of them. But some of them continued to use their Afghan cell phone so that people wouldn't know they were out of the country. They would say, oh, they were in Turkey or something like that, because they were
afraid of being tracked. But I've
That's
never
why
heard
I
of-
said the short answer is yes. Yeah. There's always nuance in it, in terms of every individual situation.
Tracked? Did you say tracked?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
The Taliban wants them, or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever organization wants them.
So thank you, we're being cautious and careful about calling on our Eritrean friends, because we don't want to put them on a spot that they don't want to be on.